my point is going to be an incredibly self-indulgent one, but I actually have a serious point to make about this, which is all I've put down for my good point is that Kassad has actually been redeemed. And the reason why I say that is because people don't realize the difference between like having a persona or joking about certain things. Now, I don't think people will get it. Like, it had gone so egregiously far, the criticism of Kassad, it was fucking insane, mate. And half of it I can tell you, because I know fans. I've sort of tried to study fans. My joke here, Neo Kai, I'll obviously be careful about, I'll just say all fans in general, because I've got in trouble in the past. I'm like Jane Goodall, studying the apes. Oh, look at that. Look at the way they scratch and groom each other. But enough about HLTV argues. Right? I'm like that guy. So I don't just look at fans saying, I try to sort of think, what is their theory of mind? Why they think this? I can tell you, I think, literally, I'm not exaggerating, 80% of the hate towards Kassad was just people who were mad that he criticised Huxley. And so their logic was like, right, well, you said something mean about Huxley, so I'm just going to be mean about you. And so it became where, like, you would think for real, like, he was the one who made fucking Falcons. Like, the way people talked about fucking Bleed esports with a bunch of, like, low tier 1, like, high tier 2 players, you would think he had the Falcons roster and budget and had, like, got, like, Nico as well in the lineup. Like, it's actually bonkers. Think about this, guys. On the day we are filming this, G2, who we were all told we have to apologise to Snacks, got 13-0'd on LAN, and I've never seen them get anywhere approaching the level of hate Kassad was getting for, like, bad tier 2 online results. It's like, it was so egregious. And so the reason why I say I think he is redeemed is because I actually think, look, it's fine if you think he was a bad GM or coach, or you didn't think Bleed was a good squad, or you did. That's all fine. That's all part and parcel of being in the scene and having opinions and being a fan. But I do think people for real decided for some bizarre reason, like it's a movie, that Kassad's a genuinely bad human being and that he, like, deserves all these things that are happening to him. Whereas I actually think not just, like, some of the things they've heard about, like, now Bleed the organisation, but also now that you've seen that he has gone above and beyond for his players in a way where I can tell you right now, almost no other coach in the whole scene would do that. In fact, I'll even say Richard basically told this to him his face on Four Horsemen. Look, no coach should do what he did. He basically treated those players like they were his actual family and actually forewent his own money to, like, buy boot camps, pay them off. Like, I actually do think that is too far. But what it shows is what insane character this person has. And so one thing I actually think it has redeemed, that's why I put it as my good point, is you can think whatever you like, I told you, about any CS related things. But what it's shown is, Kassad, it's the opposite, you idiots. You might not like him, whether as a thinker or a coach. He is unironically one of the best people actually in, like, European Counter-Strike. I'm not even trolling. As you've seen, and spoiler, the reason why you should have known that already, guys, is he's not some, like, kingpin who, like, keeps everyone, like, can't give their opinion. I've never heard a single player, I'm not even joking, even privately didn't like this guy. I've never heard of it ever. Not a single player who played for him, I've never heard anyone complain about him. So what I think you've actually got a sense for, and it's rare this happens, a lot of people, if they're portrayed as a villain, you'll never get this moment where you get to sort of show the real side of yourself. But I feel like people have had gotten a little insight into what he's actually like as a person, partly because of just all the things he didn't have in his control, that hopefully now, to somebody who has redeemed him. And if you want to hate him for CS reasons, go for it. But the idea people will, like, make it like he's a douchebag as a person, it's the opposite, you idiots. He's actually a really stand-up person, as you saw from some of the things about Bleed.
Yeah, like, so I've never met him, right? So I have, like, no of my own opinions in that sense. But what I will say is I know people who do know him very well, who have obviously kind of played with him. I think it's pretty obvious to understand who that would be. And they spoke, like, the world of him, saying, like, you got the nicest bloke ever, always have got their back. But I think for me, the insane thing with Kassad, what you saw kind of online was he got hate, especially online, for doing the one thing that I've always wanted people to do, which is, like, be open. Like,
oh, sure.
I hate that,
yes.
Like, in esports these days, you can't talk about, like, contracts,
sure,
or how much a player's getting paid, or how much a team's earning, which is, like, I come from a football background. That's sort of what I've always been used to. And it's been a very good measurement of judgment, right? But then, like, you've got, like, him talking about, like, their contracts, either their lengths, how much they're getting paid, this, that, the other, or, like, another classic one was the buyout fees as well, right? When they were talking about that. And he was getting shit on for being open, which is like, he had no, he didn't need to do that, but it was, like, such a good thing that he did. So I agree. I think a lot of people, especially, like, in his comments, they used him as sort of they used his own openness as sort of, like, a way to kind of dig on him when he wouldn't play well, when he had no reason to kind of talk about that. He was actually just trying to be a good person. So I always think, like, you could see it, and especially then the same people, and there was a couple, I even, like, bookmarked a couple of them, like, a while back, especially when I started hearing that Bleed were getting, there was, like, a little bit of weirdness going on, because I heard it via the Valorant team, that there was, like, people weren't getting paid there, and I was like, I don't know, this might happen to the CS team too. So I bookmarked a few, like, people who were basically, like, trying to shit on Kassad, like, random no-namers on Twitter or whatever, and the same people were apologizing when he came out about saying like, oh, Bleed aren't paid us, and then he was like, oh, I hate Bleed, this is a horrible thing. And it's just like, for me, that was just like the ultimate thing where it's like, because I was, you know, he's been open here in both senses, both when they're on the up talking about the money we've got to spend on players and this, that, and the other, and then on the, you know, the other side when obviously things went bad and they got completely fucked over by the org, and people just had that's the one thing I hate. And I hate the feeling that it feels like it's going to stop people doing that in the future. Like, I love when people have been open. I mean, again, we kind of saw the same thing happen, I think, unfortunately, with the C9 Colossus, right, when they all came forward with the contracts, how much they were getting, and it got utilized against them. And I think for Kassad, you know, he was trying to like surf through the absolute shitstorm that is tier 2. I mean, he's even spoken about it recently. I think match fixing is at like an all-time high. Cheaters are rampant. Every open qualifier, especially the major open qualifiers, are just absolutely full of them as well. It's like a near impossible task to try and kind of get any sort of consistency coming through. And I think he did a fairly decent job with players who weren't, you know, for my eyes, I would say like top tier 1 level or kind of players who could at that level. They're all kind of prospects in that sense. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think, you know, I've never met the guy, but what you can see from at least what's happened to him now, you know, paid out of the pocket. I know very, very few people who do that ever. I mean, most people that I've met, especially I guess kind of coming up through the tier 2, they would, you know, it's yourself first before others every single step of the way. You know, any sort of backstabbing or anything is like unbelievably common. So yeah, that's insane. Like, in a way, like, you know, mad respects in terms of like paying for the boot camps out of his pocket, doing it all, and with the notion that like, I actually might never get paid back for this, but I believe in the project. And then the second they leave the org, unpaid, make a grand final first tournament, right? And obviously it seems like they're all going their separate ways, but that is credit to kind of his belief in the players, right? He always backed them all the way to the very end. And I think as well, he was kind of sort of happy to sort of take the brunt of the blame so that the players didn't take the brunt of the blame, right? He was kind of happy to be the slightly more public facing figure. He would, if they would lose, he would be the first person they would go towards. But I think he understood that, like, I can take it, but I don't know if some of these kind of tier 2, tier 1.5 players can, and I don't want to affect their confidence. So mad respect to him. I feel like what he's done for this side, I mean, they'll always try to speak so highly of him for it.
If people don't know, by the way, because obviously the problem is that LAN literally overlapped with the LAN we were working in. Obviously, if people were going to watch something like tier 2, they'll probably watch our broadcast. If people don't know, like, fucking, like, Unpaid finished ahead of fucking Fnatic at that LAN, guys. Like, an actual real team. Like, not like nobody's. And Sangal, there's a whole bunch of, like, real squads at that LAN. What do you think, Maui, on this topic? Obviously, again, disclaimer, we are incredibly biased. We do a show with Kassad, where we at least, well, the joke is we pretend not to like him, but we secretly do like him, you idiots. Of course, he's brilliant, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, Kassad is just one of the most loyal people in esports, and he's probably even loyal to a fault, given the fact that he hired Nexa to his team.
Okay, there you go.
And I do agree. I agree with Richard in the.
So you say that like him picking up Nexa is like when Jesus was like associated with like prostitutes and tax collectors in the Bible. So I'm like, look, he can even see the most lowly amongst us, the inner light within them. Like. So Next used to be like an actual like G2 player like a few months ago, guys. Like he was winning tournaments and everything.
That was a joke with hindsight. I thought the move was actually a shrewd.
No, it did at the time look good. It did. True.
Yeah. So no, I watched the whole Four Horsemen that you guys did with with Richard and Monty and Kassad, and I just feel like on top of the fact that he's loyal, it's also the fact that he'll just try to make it work no matter what. And I feel like Kassad at this point, with what happened with the Cloud9 Colossus sort of unfolding in the way that it did, where he dropped out of it pretty early, and Extremum not really achieving anything during a pretty weird online era, it was pretty clear that what Kassad's actions meant were that he's had some pretty bad failures recently, but he really wanted to make this work. And you know, Richard said he probably shouldn't have paid for anything by himself, but like, if I'm on failure number 3 consecutively, I'm gonna probably try to make it work to my own detriment, even if it means that I'm gonna go through my own personal funds to try to make that happen. And so I totally empathize with what he was doing. I obviously, you know, in an ideal world, it's not how you go about things, but I almost, you know, in a way, just seeing the whole picture of who Kassad is as a person, you know, it's not pretty. It's not been, you know, just everything getting handed to him, and he's trying to make these moves. He's trying to make these deals happen. The Bleed organization was clearly non-responsive. The people just dipped out and left essentially. You know what? In fact, I should go find them. I'll find them. I'm in Singapore right now. I'll take some of my time off and actually just go right to their house. No, that's not real. That's not a threat. Don't actually sue me for that. Nothing's going to happen. If anything mysteriously happens to the people that are associated with Bleed, I am not responsible whatsoever. I am on broadcast. That is my alibi. No, so. Beyond that, though, what Neokai said on top of that, I feel like another thing is that Kassad's openness in the space, which is kind of like it was actually like, despite the fact they didn't work together very long, I think it's now proven to be one thing that Henry and Kassad agreed on, that they wanted to be open about contracts, salaries, and if that would further. I've harped on this so many times, pretty much ever. I think even since we started maybe doing podcasts around that time or whatever. Just if that had become the norm for teams to disclose what their contract length were and the amount, we would have just furthered ourselves so drastically in this space. But unfortunately, I don't think that's coming anytime soon. With the death of partner teams and with Valve not really forcing any kind of there's no prerogative. There's no reason that you would actually go for that right now, because if they did, teams like Vitality, Falcons, and Heroic would just get flamed tenfold. But on the flip side, I actually think it would be kind of nice for teams like the Mongols and Eternal Fire, who are paying way less than those kinds of teams and actually achieving pretty moderate success. And so it would scale our critique. It would change the face of discussion in this space entirely. And Kassad's a guy that's been very, very open about all that stuff. And so I think he has the right ideas in place. But unfortunately, things didn't work out for him here. And I'm glad that everything has, in a weird way, this could be a blessing in disguise, because I think it's a big character redemption for Kassad in the eyes of the public. I don't know what that's going to do for him necessarily, because the public doesn't pay you, generally speaking, unless, but like, it's still, if there's any guy that deserves another chance, I think Kassad has proven that he puts blood, sweat, tears, and his own personal finance into the ring on these things.
By the way, for people who aren't aware, I'm pretty sure, because I'm sure I mentioned this on my stream video I did where I defended him against a bunch of haters months before even this Bleed thing came out. I'm pretty sure there was a story a few years back where it actually was Kassad who turned down G2 to become their coach, believe it or not. Which is why actually it's so irritating that people don't know that, because then when he criticised Huxley in the G2 management, people did that thing like, you're just jealous, you wish it was you. It's like, the reason, as far as I know, by the way, guys, that he turned down deals like that is actually because, as Maui said, if you look at some of the gigs he had in the past, I actually think Kassad's whole thing now is he doesn't just want to be a coach, because one of the worst things about being a coach, I can tell you, is sometimes you don't even get to pick any of the players, as in you get a choice in the same way as someone in a prison cafeteria gets a choice. You get a choice of whatever's in front of you. You get to pick on those three things. You don't get to just go, I'd like a film. So imagine in that analogy, if you were eating something in the prison cafeteria and then someone came in like some fucking Gordon Ramsay guy, well, what's going on here? That's a bit overcooked. Say, yeah, I have no choice, you idiot. What am I working? So as far as I know, the whole reason he took the Bleed gig is he wants to do a gig where it's essentially he's dual GM and coach as well. So he actually gets to pick the players, do the deals, so he also knows it makes sense, and then you coach the players in the game. So the reason I bring that up is I don't imagine personally that he's going to then, no matter what his reps like what Maui's saying, I don't think he's really going to now leap up and be like FaZe Clan's general manager and coach. But I do think he can get another gig like this. And I think actually, now that people know both some of the things in his own life, if people don't know, a few months ago, his dad died, and the next day his son was born or something, and he was at a bloody event in the other side of the world. I think he was in bloody India while all this happened. So if you know that, and that they weren't getting paid, and then as you consider, like Neokai said, before it went to shit, it was actually looking pretty promising in Bleed for basically from the beginning of the project for 4 or 5 months or something. So if people don't know, there was even a period online where they had their own little run where they were winning I'm going to say 13 out of 16 best of X's or whatever, they had their own little period when they were cooking. So I think he has to some degree shown what he can do. You can obviously take or leave the results, but I think he will get another opportunity. Obviously now they're all available to go and play elsewhere and get paid and actually have real salaries. So I just hope actually, because the last thing I'll say is I think the other reason people hated on him is a very human one. I understand it, which is if you come out and you sort of say, hey, things are broken in the scene and it shouldn't be done this way, it should be done another way, then there is a sort of person who's very young, who themselves has never done anything, who will go, oh, so you can do it better than that. It's basically, the example is, it's why people, when he had his Bleed roster, unironically tried to suggest he should have the same results as Huxley with G2's roster. Because in their brain's going, but you're saying you could do better than Huxley. And it's like, yeah, but he hasn't got Huxley's players. Well, then, but do better than Huxley then. And I think they were doing that with the team element. What they sort of thought was, if he thinks he knows better than G2 and Vital, then why doesn't his team get to that level? Which is just unfortunately the folly of youth. Like, he didn't have those players, boys. Like, I would say in sports like football, there are a million examples of players and coaches who were godlike when they're at like the lower level, and they never had their chance with the Man City lineup. They were just working with some like Fulham lineup or Norwich or something, you know, and they were just getting like min-max like crazy. So if you're just looking in an absolute sense, yeah, they're never going to win the league, are they? But the point is, they probably came like 12th sometimes, when like they shouldn't even be in the Premier League in that analogy. Like, that's actually inconceivable. They were even 12th. So I'd say there's a lot of that goes there.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.